We recently toured the Gardner Caves in Crawford State Park. The caves are available for touring between May 15th and September 15th. A reservation is required. The rock that the cave was formed in is limestone, which means you're going to have lots of really cool stuff to look at. And the full length of the cave is a little over 2,000 feet and drops almost 300 feet in depth. The tour will cover the first 500 feet of the cave. Let's get started. The first question any tour you ask is, how do I get there? If you're leaving the Seattle area, you want to drive northeast for about 6 hours. The cave is actually half a mile below the Canadian border, in eastern Washington. However, you can greatly enhance your trip by making a 1-hour detour. Drive along the scenic Columbia River up to the Grand Coulee Dam. The dam does offer seasonal tours and is well worth the detour. On the tour, here are some of the wonderful things you'll see. Since we are descending into the earth, another question often asked is how much climbing is going to be involved. To answer that right away, I'm going to show you every single step in the cave as I exit from it. Then I'll go back and I'll show you all the wonderful things you'll see as you enter into the cave. We finally make it back to the sunlight. Alright, let's take a closer look at the cave. There are 4 tours each day. The tours start on time, so don't be late. The temperature down in the cave averages about 39 degrees Fahrenheit, so consider taking a light jacket. The information kiosk provides lots of useful information for people that are used to living in the city and not the wilderness. Specifically, warnings about cougars and bears, both of which they have in this area. The parking lot is paved and has many picnic tables around it. A Discover Pass is required to park here. Oh, by the way, bring mosquito repellent. You will need it. The tour starts down at the information kiosk. You then have a moderate 200-yard climb up to the cave entrance. Whereas most caves go into the side of a mountain, this one goes straight down. The Parks Department was nice enough to provide a metal staircase, so no more climbing down a rope to get down there. At the entrance of the cave, they have this absolutely massive fence. I would imagine it serves 2 purposes. The first, to keep vandals out of the cave, and the second is to keep bears out of the cave when nobody's around. Wouldn't that be a surprise to go hiking down there on a tour and find a grizzly bear? At first, it looks just like a normal cave with rocks. But as you descend, the real magic starts to happen. The park ranger leading the tour was extremely knowledgeable and very articulate in describing everything that we saw inside the cave. The bad news? Recording audio in a cave is not an easy task, so I could not include any of her narrative in this video. Here we see roots that have actually grown down through the soil from the surface. That would make them around 20 feet long. Along the route, you may experience bat guano. Try not to step in it. And if you're wearing a headlamp, which is recommended, please be mindful of where it's pointed, because when you look at the tour guide, that headlamp will blind her. It takes a little while to get your night vision back after that. The ranger will point out some pretty interesting stuff. Notice she's not touching anything. The oils transferred from the human hand will ruin the proper growth of these crystals. Here we come across our first packrat nest. Actually, the nest is called a midden, M-I-D-D-E-N, midden. And nope, no idea why they don't just call it a nest. Anyway, the packrat's often called nature's historian. I'll tell you about this later in the video. We came across something interesting, and that's the color green. This is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll should not be in a dark cave because it requires light. After a little bit of research, the rangers figured out the lighting they had installed is what's allowing this chlorophyll to grow. So they've recently changed the light bulbs to emit a different type of light, hopefully preventing this from happening. So here's a fun skill that's hard to develop. Try walking through a cave while you're recording. Hold the camera steady, at the same time not hitting your head on a rock that's hanging down or stepping on anything in the cave floor. This was my favorite part of the whole tour. I have affectionately named this Monster Alley. If you're a sci-fi buff, you're going to see a lot of things you recognize in here. For example, remember the critter from the movie Critters? Well, right here you have one of the critter eggs. You just need a little extra color and it's a perfect replica. Then you have the graboid, coincidentally, which is a giant underground monster. Well, they have tentacles that shoot out of their mouth and grab their victims. And this is what they look like. Finally, other than Godzilla, probably the most famous monster in history, Alien. This rock formation also looks like an upside-down alien egg. If you spend any time in the water diving, you'll recognize this. It looks kind of like brain coral. But this was formed by minerals, not by animals. The pathway goes directly over some rimstone pools. Some of the pools even had water in them. Regrettably, I was so busy filming, I missed a lot of the ranger's explanation as to what I was looking at, so I'm definitely going to have to go back there again and pay full attention instead of filming. We finally come upon the main event. Here, a stalagmite and stalactite have grown together. The stalactite is the one hanging down from the roof. The mite is the one coming up from the floor. Unfortunately, as we look a little closer, we see over 100 years ago they even had vandals back then. People carved their names into it. The rangers did some research and found out this particular signature belonged to a school teacher. So, once the mineral started covering her signature, it went from being vandalism to history. Here's the final set of steps going into the cave. If you want to go any deeper, you have to be like a scientist and have proven to these rangers that you actually know what you're doing when you're inside of a cave. This temperature gauge very rarely moves. Okay, back to the packrat. This is a huge nest. While foraging, they pick up stuff that humans drop. They take it back there, then it gets buried inside the nest. So an archaeologist can dig in here and find stuff from ancient times. Which is why we call the packrat a historian. At the end of the tour, to show you how dark it is, they actually turn the lights off. Then light a lighter to show how much light a candle would put out. This represents how much light early cave explorers had available to them. Then the ranger breaks out a flashlight. It's a special flashlight that puts out something called black light, and this lets us see stuff you don't normally see with the human eye. Here, we're looking at the packrat nest. The shiny stuff is packrat urine. Apparently, they leave a trail of it so they can find their way around in the dark while in the cave. Finally, we have the totally cool climatic finish to the tour. The ranger shines a light on the column. The column absorbs the light, then slowly releases it back to us. After you've toured the cave, another fun activity is you can hike up to the Canadian border. Directly behind the cave entrance is a short, easy half-mile hike. So we said, what the heck, let's go see what this border wall that we keep hearing in the news about looks like. While hiking, remember all the warnings you read about cougars and bears. Basically, just make noise while you're hiking so that they can run off before you get there. In a few minutes, we finally found the border wall, right here. The wall is actually just a whole bunch of trees that got cut down between the United States and Canada. They did, however, provide a harshly worded sign asking you to call this 1-800 number if you decide to do anything illegal at the border. I'm thinking they didn't put a lot of thought into this because Gardner Caves is located here, and while driving in this area, we had absolutely no cell phone service. So, until they decide to upgrade the Canadian border wall by adding a phone booth next to each of these harshly worded signs, it's probably easiest just not to do anything illegal up there. That way you don't have to try to report yourself. Well, thanks for watching.